Hey, everybody, and welcome to Olivia's Book Club, the podcast. And I'm still your host, Olivia Fierro, giddy with excitement, complete summer vibes, because, drum roll, please, we are so lucky to welcome the return of the queen of the beach read and just an all-around, just sensational, fabulous person. And very excited to talk to Jennifer Weiner. Congratulations. Yet again, you're making our summer. This time, it is with The Summer Place. It is wonderful to see you.
Thank you so much for having me again.
It is so great to revisit these locations that, in my mind, you've created out of thin air, because I've still never been to this part of the country. But set the scene for The Summer Place, and I imagine that there is some bookish type person out there, the one person who has not read one of your books. It's hard to imagine that, but let's pretend that person is out there. Where are we, and who are we spending time with this summer?
So we're on the outer Cape, the outer end of Cape Cod, which is still very wild and unspoiled in sections. It's got beautiful beaches. It's got cranberry bogs and bike paths, and you can swim in these little freshwater kettle ponds. It's one of the last untouched places in America, I think. And then you can drive half an hour and be in Provincetown, which is one of the great gay meccas of America. It is a nonstop party. It's like Key West meets Mardi Gras every night of the summer. So Cape Cod, it really has it all out there. So that's where I have set The Summer Place. We're in a big beach house. We are getting ready for a wedding. A young woman named Ruby has become engaged to her pandemic sweetheart. Her stepmother, Sarah, thinks this is a terrible idea, thinks Ruby is way too young and doesn't know what she's doing and shouldn't be doing this, and is waiting for Ruby's father, her husband, Eli, to step in and say something. Eli is completely preoccupied and is missing everything that's happening right under his nose, because he believes that one of the great scandalous acts of his youth is about to come to the fore. So he's just oblivious and no help whatsoever. And then there's Sarah's mother, Veronica, who has her own secrets, has her own past, recently widowed, living in this beautiful beach house, maybe getting ready to say goodbye to it, as she's also confronting some of her past actions that look like they're about to come back and bite her. So that's what's going on. Everyone's got secrets. There's lots of crossed wires and mixed messages and humor and romance and all the stuff that I love to read in a summer book.
On top of a set against such a gorgeous setting. And I thought that this just hit me in such a great way. And what your writing does, as you hear over and over and over again, is, that you redefine what we mean as beach read, which certainly doesn't mean fluff. It's escapism, but it's heart and connection and really digging into what it means to be human and to be flawed and to love and to hope and be disappointed and dream and all of it, and sometimes project our dreams on other people when our dreams don't go exactly as planned. And so the generations of women that we're looking at here in this book are really special, and they all obviously kind of reflect you and your family in a certain way.
Mm-hmm. So I think people who follow me on social media might know this. My mom died last year. She died in May of 2021. She died on Mother's Day, and you really got to respect that timing, Fran. And it was the day before my daughter Lucy's 18th birthday. So Lucy, my mother died in the morning. My husband and my daughters came to Connecticut, where I was, and Lucy said we should go get a cake. And I had not been thinking of cake. It was the rare occasion I had not been thinking about dessert. So we go to buy a cake, and the nice woman behind the counter says, "Do you want me to write anything on this cake?" And I don't know what to say. And Lucy looks at the woman and says, "Could you have it say, 'Happy birthday, happy Mother's Day, sorry for your loss'?" And I'm just thinking, this is exactly what this book is about. It's everything all at once. It's the sorrow and the joy and the passing of the torch, and it's new love and it's death, and it's all the things. So there's Veronica, the matriarch of this family, who was a novelist, was a best-selling published novelist in the 80s, gave it all up to be a wife and a mother, and for some other reasons that I don't want to spoil. Her daughter, Sarah, had a crossroads moment in her life where she could have chosen to pursue a career as a concert pianist or just, get a degree in music school administration and know that she would always have a job. She went the safer path, but has always kind of wondered, what would have happened if I'd really committed to that, if I'd really pushed it and tried. And then there's Ruby, who has just graduated from NYU with a degree in stage management and wants a career on Broadway, but also sort of has this wounded place because her own biological mother left when she was a baby. She wants to create a stable, loving family where nothing like that is ever going to happen, but maybe she's moving a little too quickly. But all of these women in different ways are confronting sort of that tension that, so many women deal with, which is career and family. And how do you balance it? How do you sequence it? How do you, quote unquote, have it all? What does that look like? What did it look like for our mothers? What does it look like for us? What will it look like for our daughters?
And I've heard so many times people say, you can have it all, but not all at the same time. And
yes.
So but when you have certain things at certain times and then give up those other things, then the ripple effect of that is felt throughout a lifetime, and then potentially in some cases for generations. And this book was such it was so delightful and full of feeling for me. I almost didn't know which storyline I wanted to be in the most. I really, really loved the reflections digging back with Veronica and when she was writing and what her younger self was like, because it does just open up these doors for kind of just a greater sense of understanding it. Having complex relationships and sophisticated thoughts that sometimes contradict each other, it's not a new thing that we came up with right now, right?
And I think that like when a daughter looks at a mother, all she sees sometimes is mom. Yeah. And, I know my mother was much more than that. I know I am much more than that, in spite of what my daughters might think. But it's interesting what you were saying about you can have it all, just not all at once. If you're a woman, I think if you're a man, you can have all of it all at once, yes, as long as you have a wife, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the thing we're all still struggling with, is like, even women who are creative, even women who can drop out of the workforce for a year or 5 or 10, and then more or less pick right up where they left off because their skills don't get rusty, even women like that, women like me, we end up struggling more than like the average man with a wife. And the way the world interrogates women, I mean, I will never forget when my daughters were little and I went on book tour, and reporters, other women would say, don't you feel guilty? Who's with your kids? How are you doing this? Who's feeding them? Who's with them? And I'm like, they're with their dad and their grandmothers. They're fine. And are you asking male authors this? Because nope. I kind of don't think you are.
I know you're not.
Yeah, right? I mean, I tell this story all the time, but like the year that my older daughter was born, Tina Fey, who is the same age as I am, had her first baby, and Will Ferrell also became a father for the first time. They both had new movies out, and I watched every interview as time after time after time, they would say to Tina Fey, how are you doing this? Are you bringing your daughter to the set? Are you pumping? Do you have a nanny? What does your husband think? Is your mother involved? Like just question after question after question. And nobody ever said anything to Will Ferrell except congratulations. And I was so struck by that, and it just tells me how far we still have to go here.
Well, and it also means that these topics are just ripe for the storytelling and the dissecting and the evaluation and all of the responses that we have, because it goes on, and it's no joke that it is a lot more complicated to find whatever you define as balance, or at least as happiness and fulfillment. I think bottom line fulfillment, I think going for happiness all the time is a little corny and unrealistic, but feeling fulfilled. I did have the opportunity last summer to talk to you just so shortly after your mother's passing, and I was so struck and impressed by your ability to forge on in the promotion of your book and in your sticking with the commitments. And I imagine it was a a valuable distraction or a valuable pathway to put your energies into at that time that she would have been very proud to see you doing and living up to giving the attention to your work that it deserved. How has things changed for you as you're reflecting on it all?
It's just I still struggle with it some days, the idea that like I'm the matriarch now, like I am the oldest woman left in my family. I'm the one who hosts the holidays, I'm the one who has the photo albums, I'm the one who tells the stories, and I still feel like, you know, like a young woman. Like I still joke, I'm like stuck at 28. That's how I'm going to feel for the entire rest of my life. Like, you know, when I had my babies, I would feel like I was waiting for the parents to come home and like pay me so I could go home and like live my life. And I had to remind myself, like, I'm not the babysitter, I'm the mom. And I think it just, I mean, everybody told me this. Like they told me to give myself a year. They said, you've got to get through all of the firsts without her, you know, first birthday, first Thanksgiving, first Hanukkah, first Passover, all of that stuff. But it just hits me so hard. And especially when my daughters do something that I'm proud of, and I want to call my mom and say, you won't believe what Lucy did, or you won't believe what Phoebe said. And I can't. And that's hard. I mean, and I think there's always going to be some hurt there. There's always going to be that like yearning. I mean, my mother's mother lived to be 101. So I think we sort of joke that she was like pickled in the juices of her own unpleasantness, but that's another story. But I really believed that like I was going to have my mom until I was in my 70s, and that was not what happened. And so I just have to tell myself, you know, I'm very, very grateful for the time that I had with her. And more than that, I'm grateful for the time that my daughters had with her, because she was a wonderful grandmother.
Oh, that is beautiful. This kind of personal loss and all of the ways that you'll respond to it over the course of time. Have you sat down to start a new book with this emotion on board yet? And I know we talked last time, and it really was so present in this book, and part of what felt so fresh and new about it was the reality of pandemic is a part of this story. And many of the authors I've talked to over the course of the past year have said, you know, this is so much. I wanted to put that away and ignore it. This book is in 2019, you know, or this book is in 2023 or whatever, when this BS is just like, we're not. But you dug into it, and you reminded us and kind of, I think, helped work through the feelings that or gave a spotlight to, I guess, what I felt like were my very petty feelings about the little annoyances in the household and the things that really didn't feel so small. They felt gigantic. And so I'm glad you did that. How did that feel? What's been the response to that? And how do you think that this life without your mom physically present will shape the writing next?
Well, in terms of the pandemic, I never set out to write a quote unquote pandemic novel. Like I did not want to spend 400 pages back in the depths of that any more than anybody else did. However, I felt like there was a lot of humor that came out of all of us suddenly, you know, quarantining at home, living on top of each other. And I thought it made some things that had been less visible. It sort of shoved them under the spotlight. For example, the privilege divide, you know, the people who were lucky enough to be able to stay home and quarantine and have their groceries delivered because they weren't essential workers. And how do we as a country treat our essential workers? Why do we pay them so poorly? Why do we expect them to risk their lives? That was one thing that I wanted to think about. And the other thing was the gender piece of it. Like I'm sure everyone read the stories about the women who ended up dropping out of the workforce because they were home, their kids were home, and by default, the bulk of the managing the family, managing the children, managing their education fell on women's shoulders, as it always does. And I I thought that was too interesting to ignore, and it also felt like kind of a dodge, like I'm going to set a novel in the present, but COVID's not happening. It's like, nah, come on, and there was just, there was humor, but there was also like some very real stuff that I wanted to discuss. And so I'm glad I got the opportunity to do that. And it's, the joke, I talk about this, like people ask me all the time, like, do you ever take stuff from real life and put it in your books? And I'm always like, oh no, there's, editing. And by the time things go through like revisions, they're not right from my life anymore. It's fiction. But those flip-flops in the summer place that Eli wears that drive Sarah so crazy that she wants to burn them and burn him. My husband has those flip-flops and they drove me crazy during the pandemic. But I think, like you said, the little things that became big, like I have had so many women come up to me at readings and say, I could not stand to hear my husband say, well, we'll circle back on that, Jim, or whatever annoying thing, or like he made tuna fish for lunch every day and the whole house smelled like tuna fish, or, whatever it was. Like, there's ways that people rub against each other that you don't notice until everybody's like home.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, come on, like as a novelist, like that was gold.
Yeah.
I wasn't not going to use that. And in terms of my mom, like people who read this book who knew her tell me that they really feel her on like every page of this. Like I think that the lessons that she taught me and the kind of mother she was, the kind of grandmother she was, like, I think that it's all there. And in this idea that like life is messy and it's imperfect and you don't always get the kind of like catharsis or closure that you might wish, you don't get the kind of space between huge events that you might want. Like sometimes it feels like everything comes crashing down at you at once, And like last year, like my mother died, my husband's father died, my dog died, which I think was like one of the hardest things because like the dog had been like Moochie was getting me through everything else. And then my daughter left for college. And all of these are, in the way time unspools, these are expected changes, right? If things go the way things normally go, you hit middle age and your parents get sick or they die and your kids grow up and they leave. And that is just what happens. And as much as you might wish that you would get, okay, this year will be the year that I deal with death, and this year will be the year my kid leaves for college, and I will get some time in between to process it all. That's not always what you get. That's not even usually what you get. And I think I just wanted to say to people, like, it's okay if it doesn't look the way it does on TV or in the movies. Like, it's a mess sometimes. It's a mess and it's hard and it's sad and it's confusing and it's unexpected. And sometimes it's surprising and delightful. And sometimes it's surprising and terrible. But, we all just kind of keep stumbling on.
Yes. And the messaging from this book as we're on a journey with this family and who are all essentially really good people who are just going through all of this stuff in such an intense time is just the giving yourself that grace because everybody is all flawed and all the stuff and having the openness of how much confusion can come from secrecy. And sometimes what we put into secrets becomes just so much more powerful than if we were just let it out.
Yeah, I mean, these people, like you said, they're good people, they're flawed people. They are not great communicators sometimes. And like, so much of it would have been so much better if they had just come clean with each other, like, and talked about how they were feeling or talked about what they'd done, but then I would not have had much of a story to tell. So I'm kind of glad they kept it all bottled up.
In contrast to your book from the last summer, this feels I admire the way that you are able to respond to real world. I mean, you're not siloed off. You're responding to what the conversation is in the community. And so last summer was very much a Me Too story, and it was pretty. I felt very, very. It was hard, and there was a lot to grapple with there. And so in a lot of ways, this feels much lighter and warmer and a kind of more of a reflection of a healing space for the reader, for you, for the world.
Yeah, I mean, I set out, like you said, that summer, which was my book last summer, and this gets to sound like a who's on first routine if I'm not careful. All these summer books. Last summer was that summer, and Big Summer was the
Big
summer
summer.
before that, and now we're on the summer place. But yeah, I mean, writing about Me Too, writing about sexual violence, like that was a lot.
Yeah.
And when I started writing the summer place, like all I wanted was like romance and wedding and shenanigans and farce and that whole feeling. And I got a lot of that, but I also think like even when I set out to write something that is light as a feather and just comic and warm, there always ends up being this like sort of melancholy thread, this like bittersweet quality, because like I always want to, like you said, I want to be engaged in the conversation. I want to write about what people are feeling, meet them where they are, talk about what they're going through in terms of the pandemic and in terms of loss. And I think that like, I don't know anybody who didn't have some kind of loss during these past 2 years and change. Even if it was just a loss of normalcy, a loss of routine, a loss of, you know, I'm going to work every day and this is part of my community. And now I don't have that anymore. Like all of us went through something. And I think, you know, the kind of writer I am, there was no way I couldn't not have that show up in my book.
And that is why readers love your books and why, I mean, why it means something. And it's just, it's so worthwhile. Okay. But before we say goodbye, cycling. Oh my goodness. I saw this video of you the other day. How far were you cycling and how long is this going to go?
So, okay, I have been riding my bike a lot. I started doing it after my mom died and it became my escape. And it's a big part of my like emotional regulation when I've got a new book out and I'm trying just to keep my head down and stay healthy. So runners try to do marathons, which are 26 miles. I have no interest in that, but I would like to ride a century, which is the sort of biking equivalent of that. It is 100 miles. So that would probably be like a 10 or 11-hour ride. And I'm trying to do it in September. So
wow.
follow me on Facebook and Instagram and we'll see.
That's amazing. I mean, I was like, oh, I'm so exhausted. I did 20 minutes with Cody on Peloton the other day. I'm like, oh, my legs are beat.
Cody's tough. Cody's tough.
I can't imagine being on a bike for hours and hours and hours. So, and as I understand it, people are you're getting to say hello to you along the way sometimes, and you'll get recognized on occasion, right?
Yes, although usually I have to take my helmet off. Like the only time I've ever stopped at a bookstore and offered to sign books and been asked for ID was when I was on a bike ride. They did not believe that I was the author. I was like, okay, I know I'm sweaty, guys. I know I've got helmet head, but like they kept looking at the author photo and looking at me and looking at the author photo and looking at me. And I was like, I promise it's me, you guys. I swear to God.
You need to have like that whole Tour de France entourage, but it's all hair and makeup.
My God, right? I got to do something.
It's not like IVs or massage or any of that stuff. And it's just hair and makeup to be ready. And I think people do really very much enjoy your connection on social media and how funny you are. And give me an example, if you would, of a moment recently that you just like were really having fun with it. Because we talk a lot, especially working in the news, about the negative impacts of social media and you know, all of that. But there is a lot of funny moments and magic that come with it as well.
I honestly, I think that social media really helped my daughters because they weren't in school. They weren't seeing kids face to face. And like one of my daughters does cosplay where she like dresses up as like Japanese cartoon characters. And she was able to like through TikTok find other kids who did this and connect with them. And, you know, I gave her the whole lecture. I said, Phoebe, who is everyone on the internet? And she said, everyone on the internet is a 68-year-old man and he lives in his mother's basement. And even if he says he is a 14-year-old girl like me, he is really a 68-year-old man. I said, very good. But, you know, I made a video about like, we have a new dog. And one day I was watching TV and he was sitting in my lap and he sort of started snuffling at my chest and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And then I realized I had put a stick of butter in my bra to soften because I was baking something. And then I had left it there and I pull out this like misshapen stick of butter. And my kids are like, how long has that been in there? And then they're like, please don't talk about this on TikTok. But of course I did. Yes. It's better than the microwave. It really is.
Wow, that's amazing. I've learned something new that I did not expect to come out of this conversation. That's fantastic. And I'm so happy for you that you have a new dog as well.
Yes, it's life-changing. I think everyone should have a dog.
I know. We have a new puppy, too, and we lost our dog just January 2021. It's almost 16 years old, and I remember looking at the time and thinking, this year has been such crap, like, it should, and now it's going to roll over into 21, and that was a bad sign, but the puppy changed everything.
I'm so glad. I'm very glad.
It's really true. It's like, oh my gosh, you love me so much. Nobody gives me this look when I get home. This is amazing.
Yep.
Oh my God. Well, the book is phenomenal. And by the way, the Miss Sutton Foster doing your audiobook is just out of this world.
Oh, I know. I mean, I couldn't believe it. She has not done a lot of audiobooks. She's so good. Oh. And she's also the nicest person in the world. Oh. So, if you can get Sutton Foster to read your books, you should definitely do that.
Yeah, your phone book, your whatever. It was just fantastic. Obviously, we're already ready for the next book. Is it something, summer, something?
No, we're done with summer.
Really?
I think we're done with summer. Yeah, at least for now. I'm writing a book about a bunch of people on a bike trip.
All right. Yeah. It's all research every single minute of your life.
Exactly.
Well, thank you very, very much for not only the brilliant work that you put out into the world, but your energy and your time. And it was just delightful to see you again. Thank you.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Congratulations. Our very special guest, Jennifer Weiner, and her latest phenomenal book is The Summer Place. Thanks for listening to Olivia's Book Club, the podcast. I'm your host, Olivia Fierro. Our producer is Margaret Stewart. Our editor is Nick Sanchez. You can send us an email with your thoughts or your book recommendations. Olivia's Book Club at azfamily.com is the address. And you can check out Olivia's Book Club on Facebook or find us on Instagram. Hello, Bookstagrammers, at olivias.bookclub. And Margaret is at Overbooked and Overdue. Make sure to rate and subscribe to this podcast and tell your friends. You can find us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and Amazon Music.